Hello everyone, this is Marie of Historical Belt, and today we are going on another sewing adventure. Today I will be showing you how I made Simplicity Sewing Pattern S9095, which is a men's historical costume. It is described as an opulent Tudor court doublet that has so much trim, and it goes down to the knee, and it also has pants. My initial goal was to make the doublet and the pants for Stephen, and well, I got the doublet kind of done, and the pants didn't happen in time for us to go to our COVID-friendly Ren Fair. So today I will be showing you how I made the first part of the doublet. It took a while, so this will be the vest part of the doublet that I'm making today, but of course I'm here cutting out all of the pattern pieces from this pattern and then pinning them down. I used this black fabric. You've seen it before. I made the pillow out of it for my office. I had so much of this in my basement. I don't have as much anymore because I made the doublet, and I have enough for the pants. Maybe by the next year's Ren Fair I'll make those because time. But here I am cutting this out. It has a nice faint black stripe. It's kind of, I honestly don't know what kind of fabric it is because it's been sitting in my basement for so long, but it has a little bit of a satiny feel. It's not like quite satin, and it has this nice thin stripe that goes up and down it, so I had to make sure to cut the pattern out with the stripe going the correct direction so everything lines up nicely. Otherwise it would just look a little odd. And of course I have Lucky coming in and out helping me. She is the best and sassiest sewing supervisor around. Here I am cutting out the skirt of the doublet, and oh my goodness, I didn't realize just how much fabric the skirt takes. It's so much. It gets pleated down incredibly. I will not be showing you that process in this video. That'll be next week's video, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you get notified, and ring that bell over there so that you will be notified of next week's video, where I try to attack this skirt and make it fit to the vest part, which was actually really frustrating, but it happened. Tune in next week to see that adventure. And of course I have so many cats that try to help me. This is Gabby. She is she's in charge of product management. She's making sure the skirt is it's quality. She honestly did not move until I started actually cutting out the fabric, and I had to tell her to move. She was just chilling. She liked it there. Cutting out a project really is one of the most time-consuming parts of a project, in my opinion, and probably one of my least favorite. I like it when I actually start sewing and it all starts coming together, but it's all a beautiful process that you take this bundle of fabric and make something wearable out of it. Okay, now that I cut out all of the pieces out of the fashion fabric, now I'm going to cut it all out of the lining fabric. So we're going to do this whole process all over again. Don't worry, you're not going to sit through all of it though. For the lining fabric, I am using a bed sheet from a thrift shop. Those are what make up most of my linings and a lot of my underpinnings because they are cheap and effective, and it works out on so many levels. So that is what we have here. We have a nice white cotton bed sheet from a thrift shop that I am now cutting all the pattern pieces out of for lining. And basically this entire doublet is lined, which is, I don't know if that's historically accurate or not. Tudor era is not my expertise. I would like to learn more about that, and I will probably research it more in the future, but this is for a Ren Fair, which means it is historically adequate. It kind of has a historical resemblance, if you will. Ren Fair is not a true historical reenactment. It's more of a fun historical themed festival, if you will. And I enjoy it for what it is. Now here I'm cutting the top best portions of the doublet out with interfacing so that they are stiffer. I will be ironing the interfacing on, and then also I need some interfacing for the bottom part of the sleeve, but I didn't have enough there. That was the end of my bolt, so I had to go get more. So couldn't get that quite right there. Now there's so much trim, and here I'm trying to mark the trim, or where the trim goes on the back of the doublet, but my pencil was not marking. It would not leave a mark on this fabric because I guess the fabric was like too slippery. I don't know, it just wasn't working. So I had to figure out a different way, which was this method that you're seeing here, which is where I basically just go for it. There's no marking, it's just straight on trim. So I would have my giant quilting ruler and then just put it on the line where it said to do the trim, and then I would fold the pattern piece back over the giant ruler and then just line up the piece of trim down the side of that ruler there, and then I would kind of prick it in place, and then I'll go back and actually like stick the pins all through the fabric. This is just for temporary holding so I can make sure it all looked good, and then I would go back and like stick the pin all the way through. So that's what I'm doing now, is I'm actually like taking the pin from where I had just pricked the fabric and the trim together, and now I'm actually putting the pin all the way through. Now I'm going to do that same method of placing the trim onto the front of the doublet. No, I have to sew on all of that trim. There was so much trim. This is also trim that I just had in my basement. There's this lovely giant fabric warehouse near my house, and they have fantastic prices, especially on trim. So whenever I see trim that I like that's there, that's really cheap, I just buy it knowing for some project someday I will use it. And this is what this project was. It was a stash busting project. All of this stuff, except for a little bit of interfacing that I had to go buy, was from my stash in the basement. But sewing on all this trim was a task. And I just top stitched it all to the fabric with my sewing machine. And it still took a really long time. But it worked out like really well. It looked good. It didn't look odd with the machine stone like over it, which was something I was a little worried about, but also wasn't incredibly worried about because I didn't think it would work weird. I was just worried about it like perhaps bunching or pulling, but it didn't. Well, it did a little bit, but then I ironed it out and then it was fine. Okay, so the trim has all been top stitched to the fashion fabric. Now it is time to put the two pieces of the back together. And now I have to line up all of the little pieces where all of the trim comes together so it makes a nice V in the back, which was a little harder. I had to make a few adjustments, as you see here. I went back and tried to adjust it a little bit. I left some of the pieces, I didn't sew it all the way quite to the edge, knowing that this might happen, so that I could then go back and just kind of like adjust the last little piece so that I could make sure it would line up well. And that really worked out well. Here I am, after sewing it together, I'm pressing flat that back seam there so it lies really nice with all that trim, and then I'm also pressing some of that trim flat because got a little bunched up when I was shoving it all through my sewing machine, and it got a little bunched up. So we're now going to iron it flat, and now I think it looks really good. Now I have to match on the shoulder seam where the trim on the front meets the trim on the back. This was harder, and I actually had to rip out. I sewed one side and it didn't line up quite right, so I had to rip it out and then sew it back together again. But it did turn out okay in the end. And I did the same thing where I didn't sew it all quite to the edge, so that there was just like a little bit of wiggle room so I could kind of fudge it, where I could just move the last little bit in case they all didn't line up perfectly, because I want them to meet nicely on the seam on the shoulder. So it worked out in the end, but it took some finessing. And then here I am, once I have sewn the shoulder seams together, I am now putting the sides together to sew them. So remember when I was cutting out the interfacing several minutes ago? Well, now I am ironing it onto the lining fabric. So my bedsheet lining and my interfacing are now coming together as one. I do not like to cut my interfacing so that it is smaller than my lining. I just don't like that method if you have thin interfacing. If you have thicker interfacing, I can see how that might be a good method. But I just sew through the interfacing and the lining and the fashion fabric. I think it holds it all together really well, so that is what I do. And now I am pretty much doing the same thing. I am putting together the lining so that I can then attach it to the vest part of the doublet. The lining was so much faster to put together because it didn't have all of that trim on it. So it went really fast and was super easy to just zip, zip, zip through on the sewing machine. Now that the outer fabric is all together and the lining is all together, now it is time to attach them so that they can become one. So that is what I am going to do. I'm going to pin around the edges of the lining and the fashion fabric so that they become one. I did leave a little segment unpinned so that I will leave it unsewn on the bottom of this, the vest part of the doublet, so that I can turn it all inside out. And then here I am pinning the sleeves, but I will not sew the sleeves when I turn it inside out. I just want to make sure that they all fit together right, as you know, before I just sew all of this together. Because sleeves are important, but sleeves will not be shown, the making of the sleeves will not be shown in this video. That will also be next week, so if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Thank you. Okay. And yes, I know, I put my pins in backwards. It's okay. So it's not going to fit quite right because Mahilda's a little smaller than Stephen, but for the purposes of showing off what I have done so far, I have put it on her. I think she looks quite dashing in it, really. But, yep, there's the vest part of the doublet. It's done. All of that trim. Wow, so much trim. Really, actually quite pleased with it, especially the back. Look at those points. Look at them. So sharp. Was nervous about that, but it turned out good. So, like I said several times before, come back next week to see how I put on the skirt and the sleeves. Until next time, happy sewing. Thank you so much for watching.